Welcome to the Faces podcast. We're a Christian and Muslim charity working to build resilience in faith communities against child sexual exploitation and other forms of harm. We'll be talking about what faith and interfaith work means to us and how we embed an inclusive and authentic approach throughout our work.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast as we get towards the end of the year. And my name is Nigel. I'm on staff here at Faces, and I'm joined by my colleague Melissa, also on staff at Faces. And we just want to have a quick look through our top 10 hits for the year on our podcast, discuss some of the subjects that we've looked at, and we've realized we've covered a lot of material during the short time we've been doing these podcasts. And there's a number of things and subjects that we will be coming back to in the future. And so it's helpful at some point in the year to sit down and go, wow, actually, we've covered some quite interesting subjects and some subjects that really need to be dug deeper on. So I don't know, we'll probably start down the lower end of the list. But we've looked at the ICCSA report, which looks at child sexual abuse. And that was a great discussion we did back in November. And we had a discussion with Peter and Lucy, Melissa and myself, and we looked at this massive report based on, I think it was 19 other reports. And I have to say that was one of a very detailed conversation and very much a conversation we need to come back to. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that one, Melissa.
I think it gave us a lot of opportunity to kind of talk about identity, talk about the nuance in experiences and responses that young people have. And there's a lot of talk about disability, I think ethnicity as well, and looking at some of those disparities. So it highlighted quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and so we'll definitely be coming back to that in the new year and looking at how we can make better use of that report as well, and some of the findings that come out in the next few months as well around that. I'm sure there'll be more said and done on that. So some of the other subjects we've looked at, I don't know, we've looked at the subject of refugees. I don't know if you want to say anything on that, Melissa. We've had a couple of podcasts on refugees.
Yeah, I think one of the things we haven't covered in too much detail looking at refugees is about unaccompanied minors as well. So that's definitely one we want to pick up in the new year. We talked a lot about the sort of local impact and the local movement around supporting the many refugees and sort of asylum seekers that are with us in the local area. So maybe touching on some of those experiences and having some of our friends from those communities come on and maybe share a bit about what they've been through locally and kind of the experience of community locally. That might be something we can plan for the future.
Yeah, and I think it's how we care for the vulnerable in society that's so important, and I think is definitely part of protecting children massively, because they are some of the most vulnerable and very often caught up in war situations. Yeah, and so it's just so important. So I think that's definitely a subject for the future. I was rather surprised on our list. We don't get to choose this list. This comes from people listening to it. But I was rather shocked that sort of, let me just say, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth on our list of our top 10 comes the royal visit and our discussion around the visit of King Charles to Luton. I was rather surprised to see that rank as high as it did. I don't know, what do you think, Melissa?
I think it's a very honest discussion, wasn't it? And I suppose it's slightly outside of what we normally talk about, but I suppose that just shakes things up a bit. So it was good to have in there.
Yeah, and November is so getting up to number 4 on our list. November is Islamophobia month, and so we had a discussion with Rohana, Sufyan, Peter, myself around the subject of Islamophobia and its impact on young people, and how very often you find that if you are pushing down part of society, it does have a negative effect on young people, and it does have an effect on mental health. And we looked into some of those issues and some of that around Islamophobia, and actually how much of society, in pushing down others, causes damage and causes harm. So that one's come fairly high up. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, definitely something we'll pick up on again. There's definitely so many different aspects of that we can look at, and things that we've not discussed during Islamophobia Awareness Month. So hopefully we'll plan some of those in, and again get some guests in from around Luton who can speak into that as well.
Yeah, that'd be good. It's something to look forward to. A sad subject though, but I'm sure the guests will be very good. We also looked at our local census, and I don't know if you want to lead off on this one, Melissa.
Yeah, obviously very relevant for the work that we're doing, and how we make sure that when we talk about safeguarding child protection and abuse, that there is a framework that understands how different parts of young people's identity, and us as adults within those sort of organisations that are responding to them, how our identity is going to influence the way that the systems that are being navigated and the experiences that are had within those systems. So understanding what that means in a local context for Luton, and using the census to kind of inform that understanding is really important. And I think one of the biggest messages we tried to say in that podcast was, this is who we are as Luton. This is what Luton looks like. And that's why these voices matter. We have to be able to listen to the different diversity, the different ethnicity, religions and backgrounds, and communities that makes up Luton. And all of us need to be able to inform how our institutions run, how our organisations are responding to local needs, not just being a kind of number on paper, but actually being listened to and actually being in those seats and in those decision-making places across the town as well.
Yeah, and I guess what can get lost in figures very often is the humanity. And when we reduce people to figures, that's humanity goes out the window very often. But in knowing what's happening in the broader context, it gives an overview for how we care for people, and I think that's important. And it's seeing some of the local facilities actually working in with these census figures to care for the area better.
And perhaps speaking to those sort of those human experiences, those personal experiences, when we look at the responses people have gotten for different organisations, who are the decision makers in the town, and kind of maybe sharing some of those personal stories can be something we line up as well.
Yeah. I'm getting excited about next year already. We haven't got through this one fully. Our number 2 hit was our Interfaith Week for 2022. And we discussed the issue of interfaith and multi-faith. And, it's a interesting conversation. We had some expertise on there, discussing, the difference in the terms. And I think the multi-faith term definitely suits what we do as faces far better, than the interfaith, term. I think, but because it requires us not to dull down our faith, but actually to bring our faiths together, in how we care for others. And I think that multi aspect, is quite powerful. I don't know if you had some thoughts on that. It's quite a while back now. We had that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's very clear in all of our conversations, sort of our internal conversations we have as a team, is that there is no kind of compromise. There's no holding back, me as a Muslim, you as a Christian, and we're very sure in where we stand when it comes to that kind of dialogue of faith, and we try to make sure we can always incorporate both of that, a kind of balance of that in the work that we do, and hopefully that's always a way that it supports our work and strengthens our work, rather than, like you said, dulls down either or.
Yeah. And I think what I like about it, I've been in working as in churches for over 30 years, and I have to say, very often I've met situations where people say, "Oh, we've got to dull down what we believe to work with these people," and it's none of that. It's like, you carry on being a Christian for all you're worth, and we'll carry on being Muslims for all we're worth, and actually together we'll care for some of these issues. I think is a fantastic approach, and it's so liberating. It's not this lowest common denominator viewpoint, and actually that means that we bring our strengths to play on difficult subjects like child sexual abuse and exploitation, and some of these subjects that we're looking at, which we're not running away from. And I think the other thing that stands out in that is a silent partner very often in multi-faith things, and that is the secular viewpoint. And one of the things our census showed was the growth of secular thought, and that secular thought is a belief system in itself, and that very often doesn't get highlighted, and so it stays in the background. But in multi-faith, it makes room for different viewpoints, and I think that's very helpful. In how we discuss things. And top of our list, Melissa?
So top of our list was our discussion with Ruth, one of the Faces team from Azalea, where we talked about the connections between CSA, child sexual abuse, child sexual exploitation, and human trafficking, particularly adult human trafficking. So that was sharing some real insight into the sort of local picture of human trafficking from someone who's very much involved in responding to and supporting those who are being abused within that system, and kind of shining a light on some of those experiences and the scope of that locally.
Yeah. And I think I have to say that was one of the most impactful of our discussions for me personally as we went through it. There were things on there when I was researching their website to ask questions and so on for the podcast. I found information that showed me my local area is actually full of stuff that I hadn't seen. And some of that is getting the eyes for that, and then the care and concern. So I've caught up with Ruth since and seen round what they do and found far more, and working my way through her book at the moment. But that's work into caring for a very hidden part of the community, but absolutely horrendously treated. And the skill and care and knowledge that goes into that is just immense. So I think that's really quite an impactful subject, and I'm sure we'll be back to it in the future.
Yeah, we've got lots to plan and lots to line up. I suppose it's worth just doing a quick thank you to the wider Faces team for everyone who spoke on these podcasts over the last couple of months. And thank you to Nigel for organising them so well and making sure everyone shows up. So Ruth from Azalea, we had Peter from St. Mary's Centre for Peace and Reconciliation, Tony from Hope Church, Rahana from Lantern, Sufyan from Discover Islam, Sujal from the Council of Mosques, and am I missing anyone out?
Lucy.
Lucy from Youthscape. Sorry, Lucy.
and of course your contributions as well, Melissa. We'll have a mutual appreciation society here. But some of your insights have been blisteringly sharp and helpful, I would say, into this as well, and have brought real clarity. So thank you for that over the year, and look forward to more of this next year.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
See you then. Okay, cheers.
Bye-bye.